Welcome to the second oral presentation session. The title is The Spectrum in Teacher Education and Professional Practice. So I'm particularly excited for these 5 presentations. Our first presenter is Sun, and the title of her talk is Developing Teacher Education Through the Spectrum of Teaching Styles, the Experiences and Beliefs of an Early Career Physical Education Teacher Educator. Welcome.
Hello everyone, how do you feel now? You feel very good? Give me 5, okay, restaurant. If you feel not so well, give me 1. Show me your finger. How do you feel now? Great, you're hungry, right? Alright, thank you very much. I'm Jyoti Sam, I'm from Taiwan, and you can access my profile and research through the QR code. And this is the topic for today, but this is not a theoretical presentation. I will only try to focus on share some stories between me and my students. My student means in-service teachers and pre-service teachers, right? And this is some of my backgrounds. 15 years teachings and also interpreter and TC of the World Basketball and Softball Commissioners. Also, I do some research in some European countries and Asian countries about totally 4 years before. So that pushed me to think about how can I transfer my experience and all of this process into the courses for my student, the future teachers. So that's one of the starting point of this research. So there are some keywords I will use later. So mainly I will focus on value choice, value judgments, and a series of decisions, which is main part of the spectrums. Okay, so we can see there are many research explore the theoretical and practical parts about spectrum, but there is still limited research talking about how teacher educator use spectrum under the different cultural backgrounds and contexts. So that's why I want to explore how people grounded their instructional teaching and overcome these kind of cross-cultural issues. So when I teach in high school, I love students' smiles. But at that time, I think every semester I only have maybe 200 or 300 students. But how could I cultivate more teachers who can master spectrum of teaching style better, and they can join us to do some more creative PE teaching? That's one of the points I started. So I try to answer the questions about how people grounded their instructional practice, follow with the principle of the spectrums, also formulate the pedagogical value judgment, and engage in critical reflection on their professional developments. At first, I only focus on myself's experience, but after that, I try to increase my students' experience. So that's my presentation today. So it's kind of an ongoing story, non-stop, but related to some choice, beliefs, and motivations. So the contributions are both theoretical and practical, but I will try to provide a sense of unity, a sense of community. That's why we are here, because teacher supporting is very important. Plus my sister, she inspired me a lot, but don't misunderstand it, she's still alive. But I created lots of sports activities inspired by her, and also she tried to help me to design some book covers and some teaching materials, because she shows her love about sports by another way. So I think about how can I keep this patience and show this patience to my students and for my subjects in service teachers. So the method is based on educational field research, but I will more focus on the duration between 2021 to 2023. And because during that time, I have 4 courses in a sports university in Taiwan. But the background of the courses is there are time and space limitation. We have small space, but I have many students per time. So it's about 50 to 70 people per lesson. But I only have a half of these rooms. And I only have 2 hours per lessons. So that's impossible to do the teacher education or demonstration training just like original way. So I have to develop lots new activities. So normally we all know the spectrum of teaching styles. Normally, if I want to check their actions, I want to confirm that they can present the correct movement to their students. So I will use the A or B styles. But that's kind of a skill orientation. But if we switch to the demonstration part, that's very difficult. It's a long-term process. So with many details, mostly I will focus on C, D, E, or F styles because I have to develop lots documents, files for them to do self-checking or self-evaluations. And then they have to provide reflective thinking and some positive feedback to their college. That's why, because they have to pass the teacher recruitment exam, but the exam are 3 steps. You have to collecting the resource, you have to prepare lots of paperwork and answer by writing, also interviews. You have to present yourself orally and fluently and present your main ideas clearly. So that's why I try to use the different styles. But when I try to promote some embodied activity for them to try, we play and we try to increase and develop new rules, including the principles or goals, different method. I will use the style between E to J. But at the end, if they want to fast and prepare the exam, it's totally K. They have to prepare for their test. So about the perspective, we found that the academy training about spectrum and the positive teaching experience for them is very important to push them continually using the spectrum methods. And when we are trying to switch the different styles or do some adjustments, we will consider about these reasons, address pedagogical challenge, or balance the teacher-student relationships, foster learning opportunities, or enhance student autonomy and reflective reasoning. That's the main reasons we take. So we do think the spectrum is not just a framework for develop your teaching strategies or course design, but also it's for assessing the teaching effectiveness during my education process. And then when we try to use the spectrum, we will think about these parts, some of these parts, learners, teachers, and content context, especially the type of knowledge and resource availabilities and some requirements from their institutions or the Taiwanese policies changing and class risk management. So as what you can see, the learners, they have totally different learning styles, though it's impossible to use one way to fit every student's goals or their motivations. Let me think about the student is so cute. He kept this movement about 3 or 5 minutes. Let me think about some religion things. So you can see I also have some developing turning in these 2 years because the Taiwanese policy is always keep changing. Sometimes we focus on the integrating about the IT, sometimes we promote the bilingual education. Now is for social and emotional learning. It's always keep changing. But I found that there are still something change on me also. So before I focused on lesson plan and course design, but these 2 years I focused on the teaching materials and aids developments. But that's totally different thing because book publication, you have to do lots transformation about your contents, your knowledge, your power. But If you're focused on the teaching materials or aids, that's totally different things because we all have excellent ideas. But if you want to make it real, you have to negotiate with different parties, different companies. You have to think about who will gonna use it, how will they use it, how can I help students or teachers to promote their knowledge or abilities. So also a most important part is about your fundings. So you can see this year we promote a course. It's a kind of the prompt course for social and emotional learning, but it's focusing on questioning because we all know ask a good question is so difficult. And then the other one is about the table games because it focuses on the baseball and softball rules. That's so complicated for some beginners and teachers to teach. So follow with the spectrum, different styles and teachers' needs. We develop these kind of things. And also the coaching board, but this is a modified version because you can delete everything in just one touch. But all of these things is from my students, not by myself. So I do think there is something happened after the spectrum intervention. For example, we started to rethink about what it means to be a teacher in this generation, totally different generations. And it's not just also about practice, also into how to become a good teacher educators. And also now think about internationalization, also localization and its articulations. It's not just a reflection in practice, but also how to expand the spectrum theoretical frameworks to different areas, different subjects. That's what we are doing. So I do also believe that spectrum is related to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, promoted by United Nations. And I would like to thank my team from Taiwan, which is led by Professor Robin, who shared the Taiji with you. If you didn't join, please come tomorrow. You should try it. Because the teacher community is so important. Sometimes we do a lot of things by ourselves, but while we're here, because this community is so important. And we all also have organized a symposium in this June in Taipei, in ISEP Congress. So it's welcome to join us to discuss about the physical education teacher, educator, and the social and emotional learning and spectrums. So at the end, I want to say it's not so easy to be a teacher or a teacher educator, but I still believe that we can be the light of the world, maybe with the spectrum as a candle. Thank you very much.
Johnson will be talking about Mosston spectrum in Korean and Chinese physical education, examining belief, ability, use, pathways through social cognitive theory.
Hello again, Kalimera again, and my name is Jong-sung Kim, and I will present about the little bit next step about belief and use. What I present in this morning is about Mosston spectrum in East Asia, especially Korea and China, about physical education, examine perception, ability, use pathways through social cognitive theory. My name is Jung-sung Kim, and here's our collaborator from Arizona State University. I will skip this one. And I went Dr. Dong's wedding. He he married 2025, and that was my first travel to China. And I saw a lot of similarities between Korea and China. Like wedding is almost similar, and as you can see, there are a lot of similarity. Can you guys guess which one is Chinese palace and which one is Korean palace? Yeah, Chinese one is left one and Korea one is right one. And you can see a lot of huge differences between this one and that one. Yes, this one is like, as we know, in Greece, and a lot of differences here. What about education system? we have a lot of similarities in education system. We both countries have a college scholastic ability test. We call it 수능, and Chinese called it 가오카오. We gathering all together one day and, hey, please do the test. And that decide our future, because using that test score, we decide which university we can go. All Chinese, Korean, maybe Taiwan, they have this one, yes. And as Dr. Sushi mentioned about that, this will huge affect our teaching styles as well. And also I asked Mr. AI about create an image about physical education in China and Korea, and this fancy graphic. And I asked one more time, why? Could you explain why you create this way? And AI say, China, discipline, collective movement, physical fitness, national strength, and Korea, structured PE, teamwork, fitness test, active lifestyle, enjoyment. And we can see both have a lot of similarities between Korea and China in physical education as well. We already know well about motion spectrum, and what I mentioned earlier, we follow Confucian heritage culture. Also, Korea and China, both countries have student-centered curriculum reforms. Korea have a 7th national curriculum and 2009, 15, 22 revised curricular. China, new curriculum reforms, 2022 and 2025 curriculum standards, which both nations highly focusing on student-centered reforms. And this is a landmark of study, what justified our cross-cultural evidence of teaching style. Teaching practice must be analyzed within specific culture and institutional context. Theoretical lens. All professors well known about social cognitive theory. And social cognitive theory is our behavior, personal factors, environment, influence each other so frequently. And in this presentation, behavior will be teachers' actual use, and personal factors will be perception of teaching style, and environment is East Asia PE context. But what I want to see more focus is perception and use. Perception might predict use. But I want to add one more pathways, that is perceive ability based on social cognitive theory. So what I really want to see is perception and use. How can we adding one more mechanism between perception and use? So my research question number 1 was, does perception predict use directly for teaching style B and H? I will tell you later why I select these two teaching styles. Is there an indirect relationship via perceived ability? We using cross-sectional design and using convenience sampling. Total was 216. We using structure equation modeling. Here's the result and discussion. I found some very interesting and potential unexpected pattern across two contrasting styles. We examined perception, ability, use pathways across the spectrum, and among the 11 teaching styles, teaching style B and H stood out because they represent very different instructional demands, because teaching style B is typical one of reproductive cluster, teaching style H is productive cluster, yet both show a negative pathways about ability and use. This unexpected pattern become the focus of our presentation. Teaching style B is classic teacher-centered teaching style. Like, for example, teacher make 3 different stations. Station A is how to throw the ball. Teaching style station B is how to catching the ball, like that. And teaching style H is divergent discovery style. The teacher select a topic and student produce many possible responses. For example, using 2 balls and 1 bat, how can you make baseball game like that? It is great for creativity. Model fit of both teaching style is relatively very stable. And here's the result of practice teaching style. Perception can predict use relatively higher, 48% of variance in use, and perception explain a little bit. Perceivability is only 7% variance in ability, but it is very significant, both perception and use and perceivability as well. But as you can see, there is a negative pathway for perceivability. Also, same patterns arise. For the style age, perception and use is significantly predict. However, perceivability is negatively predict. 45% of variance in use, 9% variance in perceivability. What I really focus is about why ability and use is negative. So this is very primarily explanation, but I will do my best. Style B, if teacher's ability is low, they frequently use this teaching style B. I want to mention about link between our Confucian heritage culture. This is our traditional default, and teacher can be select safety strategy. Practice style may function as a low-risk instructional default. If they believe, oh, I'm not good at teaching, they select their traditional way. And same pattern, divergent discovery style have a same pattern as well. If their ability, teacher ability is low, they use frequently. It can be something like student-centered reform pressure may encourage reporter use, and teacher may step back without feeling fully capable of facilitating open-ended learning. Something like, oh, I don't know how to do like student-centered teaching. I will give you the ball, you doing that, like that. And use may reflect surface level delegation rather than confidence implementation. Lower perceivability may coexist with reform-oriented instructional expectations. Here's the takeaways. First, the spectrum remains a valid instructional decision-making framework for examining perception use pathways in East Asian physical education setting. Also, perception exerts large direct effect on instructional use, both teaching style B and H. However, perceivability adds a small but reliable indirect pathways. This study examined how perception, perceivability, and instructional use are connected within East Asian physical education context, and perception exerts large direct effect on instructional use on both teaching style B and H. But for newer, student-centered way of teaching, perception may not be main barrier. Teacher may value teaching style, but valuing it does not always mean feeling capable of using it well. So I want to say this Aristotle, for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. So that's perception may open the door, but perceivability determines whether teachers feel ready to work through it. That's why teachers training about teaching style is very important within education reform. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for very interesting the research outcome. Maybe next step is how to improve the low perceived competency of the teachers. Maybe because as a national policy, government would like to change the teacher's ability.
Yes.
Therefore, at this moment, what is your idea how to change the perceived competency of the teacher to use, for example, the style age?
That's a great question, and I don't have a lot of experience about think about policy level. I was a teacher, but if they just make a lot of classes, they're not effective. They can increase their knowledge, but actual use always take a lot of times. So I will think about more.
Oh, okay, thanks so much.
Yes, yes.
It's just my interest.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Next, we have Craig and Shelley. The title of their presentation is Using Empirical Spectrum Research to Guide Undergraduate Physical Education, Teacher Education Program Decision Making. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, on behalf of Dr. Parks and myself, we certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here. We both teach at the University of South Alabama, which is in Mobile, Alabama, if you didn't know where that was. How we got a Canadian kid to teach physical education and health and brought an individual from England is quite interesting, but it sure helps as we mold the teachers that we have an opportunity to work with. We're going to present two studies that we conducted. It is a qualitative research studies. You can see within study one, the investigated pre-service teachers and their cooperating teachers' use of technology or teaching styles during their early field experiences. Study two investigated the influence of external teacher performance assessment on the pre-service teachers, a use of teaching styles during student teaching. Some of the findings led to specific program changes that Dr. Parks and I have made. What's also interesting is I am the interim department chair while he's the program coordinator, so I'm in charge of him sometimes and he's in charge of me this week, so it's kind of an interesting balance. The theoretical framework behind these two studies is the idea of the occupational socialization theory, and some stages and concepts that fall under that is the idea of acculturation, as far as the childhood experiences and adolescent experiences and their effects, as far as their influence on the beliefs and behaviors. Professional, as far as the PEAT program, professors, courses, content, and field experiences, and then organizational, the workplace factors, colleagues, students, resources, administration, curriculum, and policies. And so with where we are in the United States of America, we have an assessment called EdTPA. You may or may not have heard of it. Within our state, it is consequential in terms of it's tied to our students obtaining not only licensure in the state of Alabama, but also their degree at our institution. There are three tasks involved in this EdTPA. You can see that the first involves planning, the second involves instruction, and the third involves assessment. I would like to note that nationwide, the scores on the EdTPA for physical education are the lowest across the nation. It's one of the most difficult ones to pass. We have our thoughts on why that is, but that's just something I wanted to go over. There is a few bullet points there before I pass it over to Dr. Parks. There is very little support regarding the benefits of EdTPA. Again, you can ask us some questions at lunch or at dinner. We'll give you our thoughts and opinions. It increases student-teacher workload. There is added stress and pressure that's been determined associated with this assessment. As far as the next point is teaching the test. And then the last bullet point, that it dominates the overall student teaching experience. And so Dr. Parks is going to talk about the two studies that we utilized.
Thanks, Shelley. So, yeah, we did two studies with our undergraduate students, wanting to find out how direct and indirect their teaching was. I'm very indirect in the way that I teach. I wasn't. I was very direct. Socialization says you teach the way that you were taught and coached, and that's how I was. Until one day, one of my professors said, "You really like the sound of your own voice." And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me of like, this shouldn't be like a TED talk, and maybe if I do a little bit less, it'll be more beneficial for the students. So I do promote that as much as possible. So our first study investigated the impact of occupational socialization on our pre-service teachers and cooperating teachers during an early elementary field experience. Data was collected in the fall semester using a range of qualitative methods. And you can see from the results that they're obviously listening to me well, because it was primarily command and practice style. And so we wanted to look at what was kind of causing that, being as we're quite varied and diverse and push indirect styles within our program with our students. Interestingly, the students were actually a little bit more indirect than the cooperating teachers, but it was both pretty direct. So a lot of it was related to things that go on in the school, which we kind of know a little bit of this already. So class sizes where we are in Mobile are pretty big. We have some classes that might be 150 students with a couple of teachers and a couple of paras. So that could be problematic, especially being an undergraduate student and you maybe don't feel super confident in having class control. Then throw in student behavior as well, and that was problematic. You know, the problems in the school of behavior and attitude and sometimes violence were a problem. And then when you combine those two things together, you know, it really put a kind of spanner in the works for students going, you know, I want to be indirect and I want to give them a little bit of freedom. I'm kind of scared to. And we know a little bit of that already. It confirms some of the things that we already know. But what was really interesting was the academic semester, collecting data in the fall. The kids have just been on like a 3-month summer vacation. They're coming back to school and they've got to kind of relearn all the rules of how to be a student and how to behave. And so a lot of people said, you know, once I get to about January, I can kind of like loosen up a little bit. But when they come back in August, those first few months, I need to be pretty strict. So just some things that we thought about, what we can do based on that information. Typically, students at our school used to be based just on where they preferred going. So they would give us 3 schools on where they were interested in going. A lot of that was based on location. We would also think a little bit about the quality of the cooperating teacher and whether that was a good fit for that student. And now we've moved to more of a model where the college kind of sorts it all out. And it's done on basically location and address. And then principals that have put forward cooperating teachers. So now we're looking and saying, actually, maybe we should focus a little bit less on the co-ops and maybe focus a little bit more on like the students and the class sizes, and maybe that might be more beneficial. We do a lot of in-service training with our co-ops. Maybe we could focus on doing a little bit more on like indirect methodology. We've focused a lot on EdTPA with our co-ops to get them up to speed with EdTPA, and we've seen some good results off the back of that. So maybe now in-service training can focus a little bit more on the more indirect parts of the spectrum. Obviously looking during the spring semester to compare, like, do they actually go more indirect after January, once the kids have been back in school for a while? That would be interesting. And then obviously looking at different populations, so middle school and high school. So off the back of that study, I'd got some kind of additional questions and other things that I wanted to do. So my follow-up study was with the same group of students, but a year later. So now they're in student teaching during their very last semester. And I wanted to look at EdTPA because I'm not a big fan of EdTPA. It's been a big part of my life for the last 6 years, trying to figure that out and make the students successful. So I was like, that sounds like a good area to kind of hit. So we wanted to look at EdTPA and really look at the differences of students teaching using teaching styles during regular teaching and then during their EdTPA portfolio, where they record the lessons and send that off to an external examiner. So yeah, we wanted to look at comparison of non-EdTPA and EdTPA lessons, and also look at, you know, do teaching styles during EdTPA have any kind of influence on the scores? So same students, similar sort of methods, qualitative methods. We found once again it was primarily like command and practice. So once again, quite frustrating. They're not doing what I'm asking them to do a whole lot. But what was interesting was that they were quite similar to the prior study in practice. But when they went to their EdTPA lessons, they went even more direct for those ones that were being recorded and sent off to an external examiner. So there's 3 major themes that came from that. The first one is they're quite scared. They're sending their work off to someone for a blind review who makes a decision on whether they graduate and whether they get their teaching certification, and that can be quite scary. So they're actually contradicting a lot of what we promote in the program. They think that the reviewer wants to see like a really good class and everyone's well behaved, and I don't think that's a good fit at all. That's not what a classroom looks like. I was a teacher for 6 years. It never looks like that. It's quite rare. You know, they're taking away their own teachable moments. Second thing is they're kind of like acting and playing to the camera. You know, they want to make sure that everything that they have to do gets seen. And it's related to the rubric, once again, more than it is to the things that we're trying to promote within our program. You know, they're trying to check the boxes on the EdTPA rubric. And then they felt that there's so many things to do. They have a 20-minute lesson and there's 25 things to do on this rubric. You know, it's quite a lot for them to do in such a short period of time. So they're kind of rushing and forcing through the assessment. So a few conclusions. When we compared the participants to the prior study, even though we made them, you know, have smaller classes and better behaved kids, their outcome was still very, very similar. Although there was that transition from being, you know, kind of direct to like really direct when they went from their regular classes to the EdTPA classes. And once again, I'm still not convinced that EdTPA really is a great assessment. You're almost kind of like faking it until you make it, and then you can kind of do whatever you want once you've passed that assessment. Things that we wanted to think about as program faculty. So why do the students spend like 3 or 4 years with us and see the things that we're promoting and being quite innovative in our teaching, and then they kind of go back to what they think a reviewer wants for that short assessment? I always think that they should kind of like trust the process and provide a rationale for why they've done things a certain way, rather than being scared into doing it to appease the reviewers. You can learn a lot about students, and you can give them opportunities by being indirect to demonstrate the ways that they can be responsible. I don't think it just needs to be direct all the time. And then the final thing I thought about was, you know, my EdTPA scores, our EdTPA scores at South are like really, really good, and have got a lot better in the last 6 years. Do I want to mess around with it? You know, I might have a better outcome with regards to teaching styles, and then all of a sudden the dean might be calling me into the office, you know, why the EdTPA score's gone down. So yeah, there were a couple of studies that we did. They were funded by the institute, so I'm very, very grateful for that, because I was a pre-tenure faculty at the time. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shelley and Craig. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Are you, my question to you is this a one-time phenomena that the kids are changing to appease the piece there, or not? And I guess the question becomes, what would happen if now you do a research following 6 or 7 of these kids over their first 5 years of teaching? What are you going to see?
Yeah, that's the next thing that I want to do. So, you know, socialization research tells us that what we do in PETE is the weakest area. So you have all these thousands of hours in a school, observing your you know, high school teachers and being around your parents, being around youth coaches, and they all tend to be very direct. Then you come to university, your professors might be more indirect. They might try to challenge that, and students kind of buy into it, to be honest, in my opinion, from what I see within the classroom. And then they get out into the school, the student behavior, the class sizes, the fact that cooperating teachers may be very direct themselves and want to enforce the status quo, you know, like, we don't like change around here, that kind of thing is the background of socialization. So I would like to do a follow-on and do maybe like the first 2 or 3 years of teaching. So early methods we've done, student teaching we've done. That's kind of my next thing, is like, what's it look like when you actually get out into the school? If they're already pretty direct in methods courses and then in student teaching, I'm assuming that when we get into the schools, you know, it's going to be more of the same. What I would like to see is more kind of an impact in the data that we're seeing in the methods courses and student teaching, so that when I get into the schools, then I can say, okay, like, this person was like pretty indirect, or they were varied. You know, I'm not just fully indirect. It's horses for courses, you know, whatever the best method is. But it would be nice to kind of follow that on through and see, because the next stage then is the washout stage of, you know, you were very indirect, you got into the school, and then the teachers, the admin, the students, all that kind of forced you to go back to what you did initially, which was, you know, be very direct and very kind of command and
I think the other interesting thing too is some of those teachers may end up being cooperating teachers for our current students. And so that would be interesting as well, because now they're on the other side of the EdTPA coin, right? You know, they're the actual cooperating teacher. So that would be interesting. You know, what is it, 3 years? They have to be in the schools 3 years before they can serve as a student teacher supervisor. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have James, Kurt, and Carly and Kenneth. Can Carly and Kenneth please stand up? Oh, yay, you arrived. Yay. So nice to meet you. The title of their presentation is Creation and Impact of a Multi-Year Developmental Progression Immersion of the Spectrum Across a PETE Program, Phase 1 Study Development. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. We're shifting gears a little bit because we don't have any actual data yet because we're just starting our study all together. And we're really interested in meeting everybody here and seeing what everybody's doing. This is kind of our first step into this realm ourselves. So this is just our plan, and we would love any feedback at the end of our presentation or throughout the rest of the time we're here, or even email us about your thoughts about how our study could maybe be improved or things maybe we haven't thought of yet because of your experiences. So we're coming at this angle from, we just had some recent downsizing the last year. And with that, reviewing many of our student responses to our PEAT program. One of the big things that our students kept telling us over and over and over again is we need to understand and learn more methodological processes and have a better understanding of that when we are now becoming teachers. So between our downsizing and our student input, Kurt and I started thinking about how can we implement both of those issues in a new way. And Kurt and I both were introduced to Mosston's, like many of you probably, during our PhD programs. And we had discussion, how come only during PhD programs are we learning about Mosston's? We were embedding Mosston styles in our PEAT teaching, but more implicitly. And we said, well, let's just do it more explicitly. And so with that idea, and then starting to dive into things with findings from Breyer and Symington, that we need to still investigate how PEAT programs are using the spectrum styles, and that future research should consider mapping a developmental progression. We said, aha, we're in a perfect spot to do this. In addition to that, taking into account spectrum foregrounding from Phil and Rankin, and then also we plan on utilizing doses and reproduction clusters that you'll see in a moment from Symington's suggestions. These are kind of the foundations for our proposed study and how we're going to implement and then evaluate how we're doing. So basically what we're doing is just a complete replication of Symington, except instead of a one semester event, we're taking across 2 years. So we're going to be embedding this throughout, well, actually it's going to be 3 years of our entire PEAT process and seeing how things work.
Thanks, everybody. My name's Kurt Ward, and here's our little breakdown of our 4-semester development progression. And with the downsizing, what we mean by that is we had a faculty member that took a job elsewhere, and it was a happy thing. It was good for her too, and we actually involved her. That's why Boise State's on there as well. So she's doing that at Boise. And so what you're going to see here, so our initial awareness course from Weber State, the PEP 2000 course, I teach that. That's an entry-level course. In that course, we just do a quick overview. We talk about what it is. I do a presentation on the spectrum. And then also have a reading in there, and we do a discussion. And the KINES 251, that's a Boise State class. So our colleague that wasn't able to make it, Dr. Kirkham, Mandy Kirkham, she's doing the same thing. In our next phase, the phase 2, this is our second semester. In the course that I teach, the 3520, this is curriculum and assessment. This is where they have the most exposure to the spectrum. And even from a teaching perspective, early on, it is a command and then practice style from me teaching those courses, and then we move throughout. So it's kind of like I do, we do, and then by the end of the semester, you do. And then as they move on to the 3rd and 4th semester, it is very much more on them. And here's a little bit more detail on those breakdowns here. That semester 1, initial awareness, semester 2, that application, curriculum building. And so for example, in the curriculum building class, in my curriculum and assessment class, I usually will start out a lesson and I talk about or do a demonstration of what that might look like. And I really liked our keynote speakers today and the slide that they had about the horses, and trying to show them that, like, hey, there's not necessarily one style that's best overall. It's more of which tool works best for this, this situation. And having students have the conversations about when they would use it. And it's really fun to see that light bulb start to click. And for some students, it clicks maybe that second semester. Some, it might not be until the third or fourth. But watching a student like, hey, I could see how command style or practice style would be really good if I'm doing a strength and conditioning class where they don't have a lot of experience. Like, yeah, that would be a great fit for that. But if I'm doing something that's a little bit more sports oriented, how would I embed, which style would I use? Or even if I'm using like the sport ed model, what would I want to use there? And then as we get into our later semesters, 3 and 4, that Dr. Zagrodnik teaches, the students are going out and they're getting more experience, whether that's in the schools or if it's in the classroom doing peer teaching. And we're going to see that more, again, as they progress through semesters 3 and 4. And then that teaching practicum as well, where we mentioned 3 years. Their last 2 semesters, they're going to have a pro core and then a student teaching. And hopefully by that point, they're using the styles a little bit more. And we've got a little table here about how many impacts they have within each of the courses. And again, you can see the differences between Weber State and Boise here. Our colleague just teaches those 3 classes that are very similar to the ones that we have here. And so you can see this progression of the impacts that they have as they go throughout. And then we've got anecdotal experience by some of our undergraduate students who've gone through the course as well.
Oh yeah. So this is like this first year is just us, Kurt and I, kind of implementing our ideas and getting the class structure set up with all of the Mosston's implementation. And so then Carly and Kenneth are going to share their experiences so far just from 2 semesters.
Hi, my name is Carly Davis, and like Dr. Z and Dr. Ward said, I've had the opportunity to learn the Mosston spectrum of teaching from them and to be taught under its styles. And from my understanding, what I've learned over the course of the past couple semesters is this spectrum is just a gradual shift from teacher to student directed learning. And what has impacted me the most significantly is the guided discovery aspect of this. This has been super helpful for me as a learner and as I've begun my teaching experience, because I learn the best and I retain information the best when I'm the one that gets to have that aha moment and come up with that answer. But sometimes as a student, when you feel like you don't know anything, it can almost have decision paralysis and not knowing where to start in my learning. And so Dr. Z is super good at this in our classrooms. He just asks us questions to help us come up with answers that initially gets us to that point. And that's been super impactful for me as a learner. So I've tried to implement that the most in my practicum experiences. And a big takeaway that I've had from this experience is learning that great teachers work hard so that they can let go. And what I mean by that is I thought it was the heroic thing to do as a teacher initially, to do all the work, to do all the planning, to do all the activities. I thought, oh, that's what a great hardworking teacher does. But what I've learned is that great teachers do a lot of work on the front end so that they then have created an environment where their students can then take control and do the learning and be agents and not objects in this learning process. And so some of the highlights of this Mosston's spectrum of teaching for me is that it has provided so many tools in my tool belt. It has taught me that, okay, maybe if my students aren't understanding things this one way, okay, I can try something else, and that's been super helpful for me. But one of the challenges to go along with that is that there are so many tools that it can cause decision paralysis for me in creating lesson plans as a beginner, because there's so many things to choose from that sometimes I struggle to know which is best. So I know I'll overcome this just through time and practice. But overall, what I'm going to try and implement in my future career is just to build upon each style. Like Dr. Ward said, there's a time and a place for all of the styles, but also I think it's something that you have to work on progressively. Like I said, I love guided discovery. I want to implement that wherever and whenever I can. And I just want to trust my students. And that's something that Dr. Z and Dr. Ward have been amazing at, through just telling me that they trust me and giving me opportunities and experiences like this. It's helped me to know that, okay, they trust me. I must have qualities that are good, that I can build upon and be better at. And something I tell myself is that students deserve great expectations because they are great. And because I've been given great expectations by these two, I've begun to learn a little bit more about how great I am. So that's my experience with Mosston's.
All right, my name is Kenneth Kilborn. I think the best thing that I've learned so far is how much like student learning ownership is given to your students. They tend to learn better when they get to take their own ownership and put kind of learning on their responsibilities rather than just something that they're supposed to do. So I used inclusion and guided discovery probably more, I think. So I included pictures of a mini golf lesson that I gave for my kindergarten through 3rd grade students. I could have been more inclusive with what they used as for putters, but we just used the regular putters. But I let them pick any of the equipment in the middle, and then they built their own course. And it was super exciting to watch them get excited to build their course and then see what their classmates built, and then give it a shot. At the end, I asked a couple questions about what they've noticed about how to golf and then how to like do the movement more like fluidly. So I would say the number one thing that I have learned from Mosston's is that it's kind of changed my perspective on like what a teacher is and what students are, and just kind of the role of teachers and their students. So the model is, there's a lot more like learner-oriented focuses to this. So students are actively learning because they're processing, they're exploring, they're discovering and evaluating what they are doing in order to figure out the solution. Probably another highlight is just how like students are involved and their excitement to be doing things. After the mini golf lesson, a lot of them were asking if we could do mini golf again or if they could build their own course or come up with their own rules for other games that we've played. And then some of the challenges, as I've heard mentioned here, is I'm still struggling to figure out what guiding questions to ask. It's easy to say like, how did you feel about that? Rank yourself 1 to 10, but guiding questions of, this is what you just did, how do we move on to the next step? So as I go on with my teaching, I'm going to practice switching between styles and kind of moving more fluidly. I'm trying to balance my structure between my design and kind of like reproduction and production on the students and student choice. And then I just want to make sure that it is still intentional student-centered learning so that students are engaged and excited to learn.
Oh, whoops. So we're excited about what we've initially started, and then we think we have a good platform ready to go for actual data collection. At least what we see in our students' reflections and work and all their practicum teaching. And we're excited to start actual data collection in the fall to have more empirical evidence for everybody. But if you'd like to join us in what we're doing, I know it's a lot of work across 2 years. Or if you got any ideas or suggestions, again, since we haven't actually started the study yet, we're still kind of fluid even in thinking about we need to adjust this, we need to change this beginning for the fall. We're open to any ideas and suggestions from you experts. Thank you.
So the title of the presentation is The Relationship Between Pre-Service Physical Education Teachers, Perceptions of Teaching Styles, and Critical Thinking Dispositions. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Çınargür, and I graduated newly from Pamukkale University in Turkey, Denizli. This study was conducted during my final year under supervision of Professor Yunus Arslan, and I am honored to present our study. To understand our research, we must view critical thinking as a two-part process: cognitive skills and affective dispositions. While cognitive skills, which represent the ability to perform such as analysis, evaluation, and inference, affective disposition represents is the willingness to perform or internal motivation in engage in those skills. These thinking skills are like a powerful engine, but that engine won't start without the spark. The spark is the individual's dispositions. Consequently, a critical thinker is characterized not only by technical proficiency in reasoning, but also by their mental habits such as open-mindedness, inclusiveness, and respect for the diverse perspectives. Physical education provides a unique environment for developing critical thinking because it seamlessly integrates physical movement with cognitive challenges. In this context, critical thinking is the ability to make rational decisions and generate original solutions to movement-related problems. The teacher's goal is to transition students from a cognitive passivity to active inquiry. By presenting problem situations, we create the cognitive dissonance needed to trigger their minds for original solutions. We rely on Mosston and Ashworth spectrum to guide this inquiry. By focusing on student-centered styles, we directly boost the cognitive involvement and metacognitive awareness needed through critical thinking. Finally, as architects of future learning environments, Preservice teachers must be strong role models. Their current perception and value systems will directly shape the thinking-rich classroom of tomorrow's. Understanding these dispositions today is vital for their future practice. With that, I conclude our rationale. Our study has a dual purpose. First, to examine the self-reported tendencies, value perceptions, and critical thinking disposition of Preservice physical education teachers. The second one, to investigate the relationship between their value perception of teaching styles and their critical thinking dispositions. Moving through method, this is a quantitative, cross-sectional, non-experimental study. We collect our data online from 149 Preservice P teachers studying in Turkey's Aegean region. Regarding our procedures, participation was strictly voluntary. All formal permission were obtained, and the process took approximately 20 minutes to complete. Moving on to our instrument, we utilize three main tools. First is the demographic data form, which include academic level, age, gender, and GPA. Our primary research tool is the physical education teacher's use of teaching styles and perception of style questionnaire. The instrument is structured around scenarios for each teaching style. Each scenario is followed by 4 questions. 1 measuring the tendency to use this style, and 3 addressing perception of its fun, effectiveness, and motivational value. Since our participants are Preservice teachers, we adapted the item to focus on future intention. For example, instead of using we phrase the sentence, I intend to use these methods in my future physical education lessons. The final instrument we use is the California Critical Thinking Inventory. While the original scales consist of 7 dimensions, the Turkish adapted version used in the study includes 6 subdimensions: analyticity, inclusiveness, truth-seeking, open-mindedness, city self-confidence, systematicity. For the data analysis, we start with descriptives like mean and standard deviation. We use independent sample t-tests to look for differences and simple linear regression to examine the relationships. Moving on to results, as table 1 shows, there is a clear difference between perception and practice. While students highly value styles like a reciprocal and guided discovery, their actual intention to use them remains focused on traditional common practice and common styles. When we look at the gender differences, our analyses show a very clear trend. Specifically for practice, guided discovery and divergent production, the scores were significantly higher for females. Table 2 presents the results for the critical thinking disposition. When we look at the subdimensions, analyticity and inclusiveness stand out with high scores. To address our second objective, as shown, our results reveal several statistically significant pairings. This confirms that certain critical thinking habits do indeed influence their pedagogical preferences. I will now briefly state the significance predictor for each style to allow for more time for our final discussion. Truth-seeking predicts a practice style. Systematicity predicts reciprocal. Self-confidence predicts self-check. Analyticity and open-mindedness predicts inclusion. Systematicity predicts guided discovery. Inclusiveness predicts convergent discovery. And city self-confidence predicts learner design. To conclude, our findings reveal a striking paradox, a clear gap between ideals and realities. Although candidates theoretically value student-centered styles, in practice they retreat to the safe harbors of traditional methods like common and practice. Ultimately, this shows that theoretical knowledge alone is insufficient. To bridge this gap, we must focus on building the practical confidence of teacher candidates in real-world environments. Interestingly, female candidates uniquely value both structure and creative methods. Their preference for practice, guided discovery, and divergent production styles shows a high openness to affective and cognitive diversity. Ultimately, this suggests that they are more inclined to create inclusive environments that support every student's individual needs. Beyond demographic factors, we must explore the invisible architects of these choices, the critical thinking dispositions that directly predicts how teachers value specific styles. Looking at our predictive analysis, we see that analyticity and open-mindedness positively predicts the inclusion styles. This suggests that teachers who analyze ideas logically and respect differences are naturally more inclined to integrate students of all skills levels into their lessons simultaneously. Furthermore, systematicity emerges as the strongest predictor for guided discovery. It makes sense that a tendency to plan, organize, and follow a systematic approach leads teachers to guide students step by step toward a specific learning outcome with pre-planned cues. City self-confidence positively predicts the self-check style, as teachers who trust their own judgment are more likely to encourage students to monitor and evaluate their own learning. Similarly, inclusiveness predicts convergent discovery, where the teacher drives them to guide students toward a single correct answer through structured inquiry. Finally, truth-seeking is a predictor for the practice style, indicating that a value for accurate knowledge often manifests as a preference for repetition and structured practice to improve performance. In conclusion, our study proves that physical education is governed by both movement and thought. We believe PT programs must cultivate not just physical competencies, but also mental habits such as systematicity, inclusiveness, and open-mindedness. This way, a teacher becomes more than just a coach who issues comment. They become a guide who truly triggers the students' minds. To complete, the reference list is on screen. Thanks for listening.
Do we have one question for Zahara?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is, as you were collecting data using the California
critical thinking disposition inventory.
Yes, did you modify it to suit the context of your population, or how did you go about it? You just adapted as it is?
Could you explain, please, the question?
Oh, okay. My question is, yes.
Yes, yes. I used adapted version.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. We need to really focus on increasing our PEAT students' self-confidence in using a variety of styles. That was an important message.